Have you ever asked someone to the point of losing themselves? When you put your trust, give your heart, only to receive cruel betrayal. Life can change in just a moment. And for Ethan, that moment was the beginning of a journey he never expected. Fragmented memories, wedding photos dropped on the floor, wedding rings left on the sink, a text message on the phone screen with the words, "I'm sorry." Ethan once believed he had it all. Career, home, true love. But then, the woman he loved the most broke it all by lying. Hurt. Lost. But Ethan did not fall. Ethan sat alone on the sofa, the yellow light flickering in the quiet apartment. This is not just a story of betrayal. This is a man's journey through pain, letting go of the past and finding himself again. A journey of rebirth from ruin. A victory not on the battlefield, but in the heart. Ethan is the type of man that anyone would admire. At the age of 32, he has almost everything in his hands. A dream job in the field of creative design, a stable income, a modern apartment in the heart of the city, and a beautiful, talented wife who always compares with him at every event. On social networks, they are the embodiment of happiness. Travel photos holding hands in Paris, photos of luxurious dinners with sweet love messages. Wedding anniversary posts attract thousands of likes and admiring comments. Friends often joke, "You two are a golden couple. Getting married early is definitely the right decision of your life." Ethan smiles and nods, although sometimes he has feelings that cannot be named. But he ignores them. He believes in his wife. He believes in the love they built from difficult days. But behind that perfect picture was a cold reality. It all started with small changes. The slower reply messages, the golden hugs every morning, the dinners where she said, "You eat first, I'm still watching." First, Ethan thought she was too busy. She was an ambitious woman, which made him love her more than anything. But then that busyness became unexpected. The meetings lasted until late at night, the unannounced business trips, the times she hid her phone every time a message came in. Ethan began to feel the distance between them growing bigger by the day. He ate dinner alone more often. He slept when she hadn't come home yet, or woke up when she had already left the house. The stories that used to last for hours were now replaced by lazy nods, mechanical yes. So he still tried to ignore the feeling of doubt that was echoing in his heart. "It's definitely work," he said automatically. "We're just in a stressful situation." He didn't want to be a suspicious man. He believed that true love could overcome any challenge. But sometimes, love could be blinding. One evening, as Ethan was curled up on the sofa with a file in his hand, his eyes accidentally glanced at his wife's phone, which was lying quietly on the desk. It vibrated. A name had popped up, a heart icon. And in that moment, Ethan's entire world began to change. It was an ordinary Thursday evening, or so Ethan thought. The city lights flickered through the window as he poured himself a glass of wine, trying to unwind after another long day. His wife had excused herself to take a shower, her phone left unattended on the kitchen counter, a rare occurrence. Ethan didn't mean to look. It was a reflex, really. The screen lit up with a message preview, and his heart skipped a beat. "Last night was unforgettable. I still feel you." There was a name he didn't recognize. A heart emoji. His mind spun. For a moment he froze, hoping he had misread it. But the message was still there, glowing like a warning flare in the dark. What followed was not rage, not immediately. It was a quiet storm building inside him. He picked up the phone, hands trembling as he swiped through the messages. It wasn't just one. It was dozens, weeks of conversations, intimate photos, videos, plans for secret meetings, and even hotel bookings. Every word he read felt like a knife carving deeper into his chest. His throat tightened. The air around him grew thin. This wasn't just a mistake. This was an affair. Deliberate. Ongoing. Hidden behind his back while he believed they were simply going through a rough patch. When she walked back into the kitchen, towel wrapped around her hair, she immediately noticed the phone in his hand. There was no yelling, no dramatic denial. Instead, she paused, looked at him and sighed, almost as if she had been expecting this day to come. "I didn't want you to find out like this." she said, her voice eerily calm. Ethan's voice cracked. How long? 6 months, she said, without hesitation. It started as a conversation. I didn't mean for it to happen. But once it did, I couldn't stop. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. Her face was a mask of numb detachment that hurt even more. It was as if the woman he had loved for years had vanished, replaced by a stranger with cold eyes and no remorse. He wanted to scream. He wanted to beg her to say it wasn't true. But no words came, just silence. A thick, suffocating silence that filled the room like smoke. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat alone in the living room, surrounded by the ghosts of a life he thought he knew. The ticking clock became a cruel reminder of time wasted. Everything they had built together now felt like a lie. The betrayal didn't just break his heart. It broke his sense of reality. The woman he had trusted with his soul had chosen someone else. And worst of all, she didn't even seem sorry. It was the kind of pain that doesn't scream. It lingers quietly, a slow burn that leaves nothing untouched. And in that darkness, Ethan realized nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed were a blur. Time became shapeless, as if the hours melted into each other. Ethan moved through the apartment like a man sleepwalking, haunted by echoes of a life that no longer existed. The walls, once filled with laughter and whispered dreams, now felt cold and unfamiliar. Everything around him was a reminder, a weapon. The coffee mugs on the counter still held the imprint of shared mornings, when they used to talk about nothing and everything. The couch, with its worn cushion on her side, still seemed to carry the weight of her presence. The faint scent of her perfume lingered in the closet they once shared. Even the smallest details turned into emotional landmines. Photos, folded laundry, a half-used bottle of shampoo. It was as if her absence screamed louder than her presence ever did. At night, sleep eluded him. He would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind trapped in an endless loop of questions that had no answers. Was any of it real? When did I start losing her? Why wasn't I enough? He tried to distract himself with work, but nothing made sense anymore. His creativity, once his greatest refuge, had abandoned him. Words felt hollow. Ideas dried up. Meetings passed in silence, his screen blinking while he sat motionless, eyes empty. He stopped replying to texts. Friends called and left voicemails, but he didn't have the energy to respond. What could he even say? The grief wasn't just emotional, it was physical. His chest ached. Food lost its taste. Music hurt. He would find himself staring at their wedding photo for hours, not in nostalgia, but in disbelief. How could love rot so quietly, without warning? Everywhere he turned, the past clung to him like a fog he couldn't shake off. The apartment, once a sanctuary, had become a mausoleum of broken promises. He began to realize something he hadn't yet said out loud. He could no longer heal in the place where he was broken. But even with that thought growing louder, the weight of his sorrow still held him down like chains. And so he remained, adrift, wounded, drowning in memories. It happened on a gray morning, the kind where even the sky seemed unsure of itself. Ethan stood alone in the middle of the living room, staring at the bare walls that once held framed moments of joy, now taken down, leaving behind faint outlines like scars on paint. He exhaled slowly, the air heavy in his chest. It was time. The decision didn't come suddenly. It had built up over nights of restless pacing and mornings spent staring into a cold cup of coffee. But on that morning, something inside him finally broke through the fog. The apartment, their apartment, had become a tomb, not of her, but of who he used to be. And he knew he couldn't breathe in there any longer. He would sell it, not because he wanted to, because he had to. Packing was its own form of grief. Every drawer, every cabinet unearthed forgotten artifacts of a shared life. A movie stub from their first date, birthday cards in her handwriting, a bottle of perfume left half-used in the bathroom. Each item was a needle pricking a memory. But with each box he taped shut, a strange kind of clarity emerged. This wasn't just cleaning out a home. This was an exorcism. The process was brutal. There were moments when he had to sit down on the floor, overcome by waves of sorrow, clutching an old photo or a shirt that still smelled faintly of her. But between the tears, something else began to rise. Resolve. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean the love they once shared was worthless. It meant acknowledging that it was over. Truly finally over. And that realization, while devastating, was also liberating. Selling the apartment was not a defeat. It was the first step toward reclaiming himself, toward finding space to grieve, to rebuild, to breathe again. When the realtor finally posted the listing, Ethan didn't cry. He stood by the window one last time, watched the city he had once tried to conquer with her, and whispered under his breath, "Thank you and goodbye." It wasn't closure, but it was enough to start moving forward. In the weeks following the sale of the apartment, Ethan poured his emotions into words. One night, he sat at his kitchen table, now in a much smaller, quieter rental on the city's edge, and began typing. The words flowed like they had been waiting to escape, not out of bitterness, but from a desire to understand, to process, to heal. He titled the post "The Apartment I Couldn't Breathe In," and published it anonymously on a personal blog he hadn't touched in years. To his surprise, the response was overwhelming. Within days, the inbox filled with messages from people across the world, strangers who felt seen in his story. There was Olivia, a mother of 2 from Toronto, who had endured 15 years in a marriage that left her invisible. After finally walking away, she picked up a paintbrush for the first time since college. Her first painting? A storm clearing over a quiet lake. Ahmed from Dubai wrote about running. "When my marriage ended, I started running just to escape the silence," he shared. "Then I realized I wasn't running away anymore. I was running forward." Ethan read every message with a mix of awe and gratitude. These weren't just stories of pain. They were stories of transformation. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel alone. Ironically, it was his wife who remained silent. After their final conversation, she moved out swiftly and, according to mutual friends, into the apartment of the man she had chosen. There were no more texts, no apologies, no second-guessing. She had made her choice, and she disappeared into her new life as though their years together had been just a chapter she'd closed without rereading. That hurt, in a way Ethan hadn't expected. But over time, it became another thread in his tapestry of healing. Her silence no longer haunted him. It freed him. It allowed him to stop asking why and start asking, what now? The stories of others reminded him of a simple but powerful truth. Everyone suffers, but not everyone chooses to grow. Ethan began to believe again, not in her, not even in love, but in the human capacity to survive, to adapt, and, when we're ready, to rise. Ethan's new place wasn't much, just a small rental near the outskirts of the city, nestled beside a park and a quiet bookstore. But for the first time in months, he felt a sense of control, of peace. No more echoes of old laughter, no shadows in the corners. Just space. Space to breathe, to be, to rebuild. He started small. A morning routine. Fresh coffee. Walks by the river. Journaling his thoughts without censorship. He began therapy and, week by week, began confronting the grief instead of running from it. He reconnected with a few close friends and found comfort in simple conversations. Ones without judgment or forced positivity. One afternoon, while at a local shelter helping a friend volunteer, he met Leo, a shy, golden-eyed rescue dog with a scar above his eye and a quiet spirit. Something unspoken passed between them. That evening, Ethan brought him home. The silence of his apartment no longer felt empty. It felt alive. As he rebuilt, news of his ex-wife came unexpectedly. A mutual acquaintance mentioned that the man she had left him for had recently left her. Apparently, the relationship had been passionate but short-lived. He had begun seeing someone else just weeks after they moved in together. Ethan didn't feel vindicated. Instead, he felt a quiet, solemn sadness. For her. For the man she had fallen for the way things had unraveled. But it no longer concerned him. That was no longer his story. What mattered now was the foundation he was laying, not built from blame or bitterness, but from truth and self-respect. He wasn't fully healed, but he was healing. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan wasn't looking backward. He was looking forward. Ethan never expected Bali to change him, but it did. When the job offer came from a wellness retreat in Ubud, he hesitated. Moving halfway across the world felt drastic. But something inside him whispered, why not? So he packed a suitcase, booked a one-way ticket, and stepped into the unknown. Bali welcomed him with open skies, warm rains, and a rhythm of life that moved slower, gentler. The retreat work was meaningful, helping others reconnect with themselves through nature, mindfulness, and healing practices. Ironically, in helping others, Ethan was healing too. Then came Clara. She was a visiting yoga instructor from Sweden, with her own story of heartbreak and recovery. Their bond was not fast or fiery. It was quiet, tender, real. They shared long walks under palm trees, late-night talks over tea, and a deep, unspoken respect for each other's scars. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel like he was rebuilding from rubble. He was building from wisdom, from choice. He still thought about the past, but not with pain, just understanding. He had found something in Bali he hadn't realized he was searching for, a new horizon. And this time, he wasn't just surviving. He was truly living. Years later, Ethan stepped off a train in the city he once called home. The skyline was familiar, yet something felt different. Maybe it was the way the light hit the buildings now, or maybe it was him. He walked slowly through the streets, passing old cafes, bookstores, and parks that once held memories of another life. His pace was calm, deliberate. There was no rush, no anxiety, just presence. Eventually, he stopped in front of his old apartment building. The windows had new curtains, different furniture, a different story unfolding behind the glass. Ethan smiled, not with sadness, but with quiet gratitude. He no longer felt the weight of betrayal. What had once shattered him had become the very fire that forged him into who he was now. Stronger, quieter, and more whole. Not untouched, but unbroken. In his hand was a dog leash, Leo trotting calmly beside him. In his heart was peace. Ethan didn't return to reclaim anything. He returned to honor the journey. The man who had left the city was lost, fractured. The man who returned had found himself. And as he turned away from the building, he whispered, "Thank you for everything." Then he walked on toward whatever came next. The sun melts into the horizon, casting golden hues over a quiet lakeside path. Ethan walks slowly, hands in his pockets, Leo trotting faithfully beside him. The air is calm. The world feels still. There comes a moment, after all the storms, when peace no longer feels like an absence of pain, but the presence of self. As Ethan gazes across the water, the reflection of the sky shimmers like a quiet promise. There are no more ghosts trailing him, no more unanswered questions. He doesn't need closure, he's already found clarity. The journey through betrayal, heartbreak, and loneliness didn't break him. It revealed him. Leo nudges his hand gently, and Ethan smiles. Not the kind of smile that hides hurt, but the genuine, quiet kind that speaks of growth, strength, freedom. Pain will visit us all, but what we do with it, that's where transformation lives. Ethan kept walking, the path ahead long and unwritten, but finally his own.